everybody. Welcome to this special podcast. It's my privilege and honor to introduce to everybody in North America, because I'm sure people in Europe already know him, to introduce Donato, aka Donnie Freens from the Netherlands, who has quickly become known to everybody with his performances in virtual racing this year. It's been really quite impressive. I'll just read off the list of his accomplishments to date. In the virtual paddle league, he sits first at the top of the leaderboard in the 5K with a really fast time of 28:23. In the 2K, he also sits at the top with a fast time of 11:20. And then he's tied for third place in the 1K with a time of 5:16. And then he also did the SUP United 10K, which was a one-off event, right? Donnie, you didn't have an opportunity to do multiple attempts. It was a one-time race in the 10K. And he was finished third there with a time of 58:17, which is fast. So, I mean, just looking at your 5K time, I remember, I think at the time, Andre was leading, and I went out and I did a 20, I thought I broke 29. It turns out I was just over it. I was 29:03, but I felt pretty good about it. I came home, I entered my time, and within 3 hours, I looked and there was somebody from the Netherlands who was 9 seconds faster than I was, and he was 14 years old. And so I thought that was pretty cool. And then since then, you've actually, I think Peter from Germany did a time that beat that, and then you went out and you beat him. So I don't know that, I mean, I'm waiting for a good day to try to do another time. A good day meaning I feel good and that the conditions are decent, but I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do 28:23. That's pretty fast. I really want to see what guys like Boothie and Connor and Casper and Lincoln Dews, you know, what kind of times those guys would be doing, because that's fast. So we're going to ask you all about how you managed to get so fast, Donnie, and what you do for your training and that type of thing. So it's a real pleasure to have you here. Thank you for agreeing to do this with us. And I hope you have as much fun as we're going to have and as the audience is going to have finding out about you. Okay, so how you doing?
Hello, Larry. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm very stoked to talk to an Olympic Canadian paddler, Olympic champion. I really, it's an honor to be chatting with each other. Because the SUP community is so small and so humble. Who knew we were chatting 1,000 kilometers apart?
Yeah. I mean, the thing that I thought was amazing was that if we didn't have this virtual racing, I would have never, I mean, eventually I would find out about you, but I wouldn't have got to know you this year, and I wouldn't have had the opportunity to be, you know, competing with you, obviously. And it would be really cool if we were able to do a race together, because, you know, when you are within 15 to 30 seconds of somebody in a virtual race, there's a good chance that you will see them on the race course in a real race. But I would never, you know, under the circumstances, I don't know when I'm ever going to get to Europe to race SUP at this point. And eventually I assume you will come to North America. But, you know, we wouldn't have met each other if it weren't for this virtual race. And so I'm really excited about the opportunity to meet you. And because I have a feeling we'll be watching you for many years to come. So I've got a few questions for you that I'd like to know more about. I mean, I'm curious as to how you've gotten started and how you've become so fast, so early in your career. But I know the audience is going to be really interesting to learn more about you as well, because I can tell you, Tim has told me that he talks to a lot of people in his part of the world, which is Florida, And a lot of people down there are scratching their heads and going, who is this Donnie Freens? And how is he going so fast? You know, and some people are even skeptical about whether you've actually gone that fast. And, you know, to that I say the GPS doesn't lie, you know, and you appear to be just, you know, one of those phenoms that becomes very good at a very early age. And generally those people end up having long and really successful careers. So I'm excited to meet you now. I'm excited to ask you a few questions, and I'm really excited to see where you end up going in the future, because I think your future is bright. So let's get started with a few questions. So the first thing is, you're from the Netherlands, and whereabouts do you call home in the Netherlands?
Well, I was born in Amsterdam, but at the age of 1, I moved to Qatar in the Middle East.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I've lived there for the most of my life,
Mm-hmm.
over 10 years, and it's only been 3 years that I'm back in the Netherlands.
Okay. That's
well. To give a bit of an introduction about Qatar. Well, Qatar is in the Middle East, and in order to come there, you have to have a job. I had friends at school, international school, and it was very hot, humid, and dusty. Mostly, I spend my days, not mostly, but inside because it's too hot. In the summer, it could get up to 50 degrees Celsius. Very, very hot. And there are not often a lot of waves or wind to windsurf or to surf. So what better sport can you practice than paddling, right? I started paddling around 2016 on a all-around board. And when I was 11, I think I got into the real racing of stand-up paddling. I think my first race was the Lost Mills back in the day in 2017. That was one of my toughest races, even though it's my first and I couldn't prepare myself as I would so now. But it's a very tough race, 19.5 kilometers. Sort of a tough race.
And did you do that race? You did it like against all the adults?
Yes, because I did do the kids race. I remember that. But you only get to a certain level if you compete with the big guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
And although I finished dead last, it was still a unique opportunity to see, well, even though this is such a tough race, I have a strong mindset and my body can do it.
So let me ask you, then you started in Qatar, and did you start with friends, or was it something that you just you did on your own, or you did with your parents, or do you have older brothers and sisters that were involved in it? How did that happen?
Well, my dad was a professional windsurfer back in the day, and in his time he found the sport kind of dorky. He thought, why do this supping? Windsurfing is much faster, bigger sails, more power.
Right.
And you're waiting on days like there's no wind and you're just staring and you're waiting for it to blow.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing. So you stumble upon a sport where you don't need wind, you don't need waves. And that's how me and my dad started paddling.
That's amazing. Interesting. Like, I'll say it right now. You remind me a lot of Connor, in that you are really successful and fast at about the same age. I think he was 13 the first year he won Maui to Molokai and upset Dave Kalama, and that was like a legendary race. from the pictures I've seen of you, you look kind of similar. You're blonde, you're fairly tall. Interestingly enough, his parents were big windsurfers as well. And so that's kind of how he got into it. He was a windsurfer before he was a SUP paddler. So that's a really interesting parallel. And I'm sure there's others, but that's really interesting. So it was your father and you, and it wasn't friends at school or anything like that. It was an activity that you did with your dad.
Yes, I did that activity with my dad. He found it very important that I could swim and got in different kinds of sports to be a more universal person.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, usually somebody in who had been growing up in the Netherlands, I always think of the first sport that comes to mind when I think of the Netherlands is football, right? Yeah. And then in the winter, I think of speed skating. You've got all these beautiful canals. But if you've been in Qatar, you certainly didn't grow up speed skating. Was there any ever thought of being a football player like so many other kids in the Netherlands?
Well, I did all kinds of sports. I did football. I did rugby. Rugby was a sport I really liked. It's more a team game, mm-hmm. And you're so close to each other as a team. Also, I did taekwondo. It's a defense sport, and I got the black belt in that sport.
Wow.
Yeah. When we moved back to the Netherlands, I was still continuing doing football and rugby till a year ago. And if I were to play rugby, I were to play with kids that were a year older than me, one age group up.
So you've done. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
In the winter, I think I'll probably start doing these sports since it's now summer and the weather's perfect for supping. Mm-hmm. In the winter, I can only go out maybe a few times in the week after school, and even then, my dad may be busy and I'm packed with homework.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. I mean, clearly you don't mess around when you pick up a sport. If you're a black belt at a very young age in Taekwondo, and then you're obviously you're at a high level in your paddling, you don't mess around. Like a lot of kids, who are like, you just turned 15, right?
Yes.
So a lot of kids, like 13, 14, like you, they do a lot of different sports, but it's more experimentation and play and just being kind of a well-rounded kid, active kid. They're not necessarily becoming expert at any sport at that age, and I know that there's different levels of black belt in most combat sports, but to think that you're a black belt and you're also like a really high level paddler at 14 years old, now just turned 15, is pretty amazing. I think it must say something about your commitment to learning and your willingness to do a lot of hard work to get better at something. And those aren't always qualities that kids have. A lot of kids are just happy to sort of show up to the whatever the sport is, to the practice site, and kind of have fun and work hard, but not too hard, have fun. And I think if you're going to get to the level that you're at in two different sports, you have to spend a little bit of time thinking about those sports when you're not actually doing them. Would you say would you agree that that's something that's sort of part of your mental makeup, that when you're not paddling, that you're thinking about it, or when you weren't doing Taekwondo, that you were thinking about it so that, you know, you were able to better paddle or perform when you got to your next practice? Do you find that?
Well, I think the main reason is how my parents raised me. If you start something, you have to finish until the end. There's no, you can't give up in the middle. You just have to, if you commit to something, you have to be willing to finish the prize. My dad always says, if you work hard, train hard, you will drink champagne. If you don't work hard, you won't drink champagne.
Right.
These sports, yes, I really like to do these sports not only for the fun, because you have committed to something and you can't just hands off the table and you drop the sport and forget about it. You have to finish the sport.
So, which raises an interesting question that we can get to, but you know, based on the way you've explained it, the logical question would be, what would you consider to be finishing the sport? You know, I mean, let's forget about Taekwondo for a second and focus on paddling, because that's how we met each other. That's why we're here. That's why we're talking today. You've already done more than most kids your age. Like, what you're doing is not typical. I've seen it in sprint canoeing, maybe in more than 40 years of being involved. I've seen it maybe once every 20 years that you see a kid who at a very young age is competitive with the top senior athletes in the world. But it's very unusual. And I believe it's unusual too in stand-up paddling. And so, you know, clearly you're on a track where you've started the sport and you've invested a lot of time in it because you want to, you know, I love your father's saying about drinking champagne. But what would you call the end if you know, you're still really at the beginning? So what in your mind, what is the end? Where do you hope to take this?
Well, there's not really an end, but if you continue a task for long enough, you might find a passion in the sport. You might find you live your life to be willing to be special, to complete that sport, to have a goal in life, to finish your goal in life.
So what is your goal in paddling? Are you willing? Is that something that you are willing to share, or is that something that is very, you know, you keep very personal?
Well, of course, I would love to become a world champion, but we all know it's not from today to tomorrow. You're world champion. It's every single day, every training. You're one step closer to becoming what you desire. Every training, every time you take a sip, your muscles are getting nutrients and making themselves stronger.
I have to tell you something that, so when I started paddling when I was 11 years old, and I just stumbled upon it with some friends from my neighborhood. And I wasn't particularly good when I started. It took me 6 or 7 weeks just to be able to balance in a C1 racing canoe. And I was slower at learning it than my friends. And I made my goal that I wanted to be better than my friends because they initially were better than me. And then in 1976, I saw a local guy, win a silver medal in the 500-meter C1 at the Olympic Games in Montreal. And I can remember turning to my parents, because we were watching it on TV together. I remember turning to them and saying, that's what I want to do. And every waking moment from that point forward, that's all I thought about. You know, the first thing I would think about in the morning, the last thing I would think about before I went to bed at night. And like you, I mean, I had the idea that every day I could do something that would get me closer to that dream. But I used to write on my papers and tests and things like that that I would hand in to the teacher at school. I used to write on it. I would write Larry Cain, future world and Olympic champion, and then I'd hand it in. And I wasn't shy about telling people that this is what I was going to do. And I was lucky that I had some good people around me, older athletes and very good coaches to give me some good direction. And a number of years later, I was able to do it at 21, actually. So still quite young. So it's particularly interesting for me to meet you because, as I said, you don't see people with this mindset at a young age every day. And I've seen like one other Canadian in my time who's had this similar mindset, and it was in a kayak. And he ended up winning 4 Olympic medals and winning a gold and a bronze in K1 in Athens in 2004. But he started around the same age and had the same determination. And you, just talking to you, it's very similar, the approach you have. And so to me, that's fascinating because it's like stepping back and thinking about the things I used to think about when I was younger, or the things I saw Adam, this K1 paddler, do when he was young. And I know where it led. And of course, there are no guarantees in life and anything can happen. But it's really interesting to see somebody in stand-up paddling, at the same point early in their career with the same mindset and saying this very similar things to himself as we said. To me, it's fascinating, and like I said, it makes me a big fan of yours, and I'm really interested. I'm going to follow you closely because I'm really interested to see where you're going to go. I'm really excited about this, so it's really quite awesome. Let me ask you, do you have, so is your father your coach?
Yes, my father's my trainer and coach.
Mm-hmm.
With Vincent Guyem from Training Week. They work together to make a training program for every day, every week.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad tweaks certain bits to make a training session longer, more intensive, or the watch doesn't have every single ability to do the training session, so we change it up to time or kilometers. It varies time to time.
And did he? So that's how you get the workouts, and you do the work. How many times a week are you training? How many times a week are you paddling typically?
Well, in the winter, only a few times a week, because daylight, we don't have all the daylight and homework and everything else. But now, because with the homeschooling, and even then, I now have vacation because I finished school. I finished this year. Pretty much every day, I try to paddle every day. I'm very lucky to have dad that brings me everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Is so supportive, just as my mom.
And so that would be like once a day. So you right, like, or do you do multiple training sessions in a day?
I do. Yes. In the morning, I do cross training that you on the fitness equipment.
Right.
Then later in the midday, paddling, and after stand-up paddling, I try to work on my kayaking.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I just recently got into kayaking. I thought there's so much to learn. You can learn from the kayak guys, right? If supping becomes an Olympic sport, I think we're going to have a hard time with all the kayak and the Canadian boys.
I agree. I think that to get SUP into the Olympic program, it likely is going to take something away from the kayak or canoeing, and I don't know that they're going to want to give that up. I hope that it can happen where both sports are in the Olympics. I mean, because I now look at myself as I spent the first 30 years of my paddling in a C1, and now I've spent 10 years or more on a stand-up board, and I love them both. And I would like to see both in the Olympics, but I think it might be tough to make room for both sports. So, I mean, only time will tell where it goes, but are you as serious about your kayaking as you are about stand-up paddling, or is it something that's just starting?
It's just about starting, and I think you can learn so many things about kayaking, the catch, the use your core, not too much of your arms. It's put yourself over the paddle, pole vaulting, and rather than pulling the water towards you.
Right.
And these sports, they help each other, right? For example, you have Kai Lenny, he does foiling, he does kite surfing, windsurfing, surfing, big wave surfing, stand paddling. All these sports make you good in every sport.
Right. I agree with that. Let me ask you, your father, you mentioned, sets your training program. Is he also the one that helps you with your technique?
Yes, my both Vince Guillem and my dad help me with the technique. The most important bit is your knees apart and not to touch each other.
Right.
That's one of the most important problems I sometimes stumble upon. And to keep your weight and body inside your board, not outside the board. You can lean on a paddle, but keep your weight inside the board with your belly button in the middle.
Right. Okay.
That's what I try to keep in mind when I'm paddling. I try to paddle as not very aggressive, but very calm. Try to get the glide and not work too hard.
Mm-hmm.
That's the key thing. Sometimes you're very tired and you're working hard at the end of the race, but the most important thing is that you slow down, think about your breathing, and try to move the paddle very smooth through the water. That's one of the main things.
So I mean, I always am very interested to talk to top paddlers, whether it's in canoe or kayak or stand-up paddling, to hear what they say about technique. And my impression is that everyone explains their technique a little bit differently, but there are major similarities in what people are doing. They're gathering water on their paddle and holding it there and then pulling themselves by the paddle, like you mentioned,
yes,
with kayak. And, they're trying to relax all the muscles that they don't need and really only use the muscles that they must use, and only at the time they need to use them, so that their stroke can be, as you mentioned, relaxed, and they're trying to use their body weight, but without upsetting how the boat or the board is sitting or moving in the water. And so, I've not been able to find video of you paddling. I've seen or long video of you paddling. I've seen pictures, and but it's it's interesting that we have to ask who was your technique coach, because you don't go fast like you're going now, particularly at a young age where you haven't yet fully developed all the strength that you will end up having as an adult. You don't do that without very good technique. And so, that raises the question, who is it that has helped you with your technique, and how have you developed your technique as you've begun to paddle? And it's your father, and you guys are working, have, I guess, from the beginning worked together to find a way that is really effective for you.
Well, at the beginning of paddling, was mostly just making kilometers, and we had the main line from pulling paddle in the water, pulling yourself forward, but nothing really major. But recently, with Vincent, he told us how to do it the right way. Keep your board as steady as possible, no wobbles, put your paddle in the water. And you have so many athletes to look up on. You have T1, Michael, Connor, Lincoln. You have so many paddlers that you can make their bread and butter your own.
Mm-hmm. You take a little bit from many different people, and it becomes your formula. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have, like you said, if we were the same length, same weight, our bones between our joints are all different, and we all have a different way of paddling.
Right.
There are similarities between paddlers that the style. It's mostly character. You can't. I'm not personally a hammer guy, all power. I'm trying to take it smooth and let the board do its work.
And imagine if what you might be able to do as well when you do develop a little bit more power, like from having gone from a 14-year-old athlete to an adult, from having coached a lot of athletes in canoeing from 14 years old to adult, there is a huge gain in strength when you get into your 20s. And I've always said that the best way to paddle is to be strong, but not try to use your strength, and just let your strength help you without you trying to force it, But, so the way you're paddling now is smooth and efficient. You're not trying to power it. And it's probably good because, at 14 years old, you don't have as much power as an adult athlete would. But at some point in your career, you're going to have that. And whether you try to use it or not, it will find its way into your stroke, and it will help you. It will make you that much better. So I think it's a really good approach to learn to be efficient now without relying on power. And then as you acquire more, it will be there to help you, even though you won't ever be consciously trying to use it. I've found that if you try to use your strength, oftentimes it makes you slower. But if you just let it come naturally and you focus on the things you're talking about being smooth and efficient and having your connection, that then you can allow the power to come naturally into your stroke, and it's very effective. So it's really interesting, the approach you're taking, and I also like what you mentioned about all of the different guys and everyone, different. You even mentioned the length of your bones. And one of the things I like to say is that, that no one should be trying to paddle like somebody else. No one should be trying to paddle like me. No one should be trying to paddle like you. No one should be trying to paddle exactly like Connor or Lincoln or Michael. But we can, if you look at people who are paddling well, there's similarities in the basic things that they do, like gathering water on the blade and pulling themselves by the paddle, using big muscles before they try to use smaller muscles, using their body weight on the paddle, but not upsetting how the board works with their body weight. You know, doing things with a positive blade angle rather than behind them with a negative angle. These are the sort of the basics that people do, but how they end up doing them is different for everybody because no two people's bodies are the same. And I talk about, you know, even if two people were the same size, if you and I were the same height and the same weight, it doesn't mean our bodies are identical, you know, because the lengths of your arms might be longer than mine and my legs might be longer than yours, which is going to dictate how we end up paddling, right? So it's not often I hear somebody speaking in this language like you're doing, and you're doing it, and you're doing it again, you know, early in your career, which I think is, you know, you and your father and Vincent have figured a lot of things out, I think, and it's not an accident that you're going as fast as you are, you know, and that's fascinating because not that many people get it figured out ever, let alone, you know, at 14, 15 years old. So it's a compliment to you, but it's a compliment to the people that have helped you as well, because it's, you're definitely doing some right things.
Yeah, the thing is with technique, if I were to do the same technique now as for years back, if you want to do a certain technique, you need to have a certain strength, a certain technique, and not always you can have that technique, because the power I have now and the power I had 2 years back is different, right? Also means two different techniques, right?
Right.
Also means two different conditions, how fit you are. And I think the most important reason that I'm paddling so hard now is because I now have the power and the strength to endure a very good technique for a long time. That's the most particular reason.
Yeah, you found something that's sustainable, right? That you can do and for a long time. So speaking of a long time, have you done the 11 city tour, and will you do it this year?
I'm not very sure. I think it's still, even for 15 years, and I can paddle a 5K very fast, 10K, 16K, 20K tops, but 220 kilometers is a little insane.
Yeah.
The Molokai to Oahu is a very iconic race, let alone
Right.
the city. I don't think I'm ready for it yet. I think just a few years, and we all have our. Most races aren't 220 kilometers. Most races are 13 to 20K, and I think why I train for such a long time to do one race for so long. I think my body isn't ready for it. Because to recover after the race, that's the most difficult part, I think. It takes a month or two to recover, and to train for the race even longer.
It's interesting you say that, because you know, I came to stand-up paddling when I was much older, and I'd already finished my you know, my main paddling career, and in sprint canoeing, my longest race was 1,000 meters, so under 4 minutes, and then I raced 500 meters as well, so under 2 minutes. Occasionally we would do like a marathon race, but it wasn't you know, super important. And And then I got into stand-up paddling, where races were an hour, you know, like a 10K, 15K, maybe a 20K, like the Carolina Cup or something. And then I even got into racing in, I don't know if you've heard of this race, Chattajack in Tennessee, down the Tennessee River. It's a 50K race. And, but people have asked me, oh, you should do the 11 city tour. And, you know, on one hand, I would love to go to Amsterdam again, because it was the first place I raced in canoe in Europe as a senior in 1980. I raced in a little town on a canal called Zaandam. And, but I have no interest in doing either a 220K race nonstop, or doing a race like Chattajack, which is 50K, basically 4 or 5 days in a row. You know, I know what one Chattajack does to my body. You know, it's a 5-hour race, and for me, and I know what that does in recovery time I need, and I have no interest in doing more. I love paddling. I love it, and like I can't stop. It's my addiction, but I love it for a period of time, and then I like to, you know, go and do something else and come back and enjoy it again the next day, rather than doing it again and again and again in the same day. I'm afraid I wouldn't enjoy it as much. So, but I'm older, and I recognize that I'm older, and that there's a limit to what I should do, both for my enjoyment and probably for my health as well. And I was interested in hearing what you had to say, because sometimes younger athletes are very enthusiastic, almost to a fault, and they will do more than maybe they should. But again, you know, I'm hearing maturity in your answer, because you're talking about maybe you're not ready for it yet, and you know, you're clearly ready for a lot of things in our sport. But I just think that's it says something about you and the people that are advising you, that you can have the patience to say, I'm not ready for that yet. And there will be time, I'm sure, in the future for you to do that. But I just think it's remarkable. Let me just ask you a few more questions, because I had some written down, and I haven't got to all of them yet. What is it that you like most about stand-up paddling? Paddling in general.
For paddling, I think it's just the outdoor experience. Wet feet, the catch of the blade, birds singing, the water, going fast, the glide. It's all these things that make the sport whole. Makes one entire experience. Even with kayaking, it's the same thing. It's just if you're passionate about something, it's hard to describe. You have to try it for yourself. Passion makes you even, for some people, think crazy. I was doing a downwind with both 4-7. And 3 people called the police because I saw a kid in the ocean alone, and they thought I needed help.
Yeah.
Although I was well prepared. I had a phone, camelback, rest tube, flotation device, leash, and my dad was tracking me with my phone.
Right.
He knew exactly where I was the entire time. And at some points, he would stop and take pictures or see how I was doing. There are so many things that paddling makes such a good sport. Even if you're older or young, you have everyone can do the sport. It's just we're very passionate about the sport and take it to a next level. if you just started off supping, you can do on a inflatable, on a hardboard, and you don't even have to paddle fast. No one's telling you to take it to the next level. You could just do it how you would like to do it.
Donnie, these are great answers, because everyone I talk to says the same thing about stand-up paddling. You know, they mention the nature, the wet feet, the birds, the sound of the water. Like, I never understand why people use earbuds with music when they're paddling, because to me, that takes away part of the experience. You know, I want to hear the sound of the water coming off the nose of my board. I want to hear this, whether my paddle is splashing or not. I want to hear, if I'm downwinding, I want to hear the waves behind me, you know, so I know what's coming. You know, if there's birds, seagulls or something, I want to hear them making noise as I'm paddling. This is all part of the experience. And many people I talk to say the same thing. It's especially people who haven't spent a lot of time on the water before. When they get out on the water, they just find it's a whole new world. And they become very passionate about their paddling as well, perhaps at a different level. But this is the one thing I've realized about paddling and getting involved in something like Paddle Monster, where I can reach out and interact with so many paddlers of so many different levels, is that even if they're you know, an adult in their 40s that has never paddled before and they've only just started, in a very short time, they are experiencing the same things that I'm experiencing or that you're experiencing. And it may be at a different level, but the level doesn't so much matter. It's the experience of being out there. And I've found that if I'm talking to a paddler, I'm talking to somebody who has shared a common experience. And I think it's a really special thing to be able to go out and do these things on the water. And I actually think it's even more so this year with the pandemic, because we're able to go and do things sort of away from other people. And even if we're training with somebody else or paddling with somebody else, we're far enough apart from them that it's safe. And yet, you know, we're able to get all the exercise that we know is healthy, and continue to do what we love to do. You know, if we were doing a sport that was indoors, we wouldn't be able to do it, you know, at this time. And yet, we're probably doing the perfect sport for being outside, you know, and being distant from other people. So, again, I'm really enjoying your answers, because they just seem so perfect, you know. Let me ask you, like, you're doing very well. You're at the top of a bunch of different leaderboards. You're putting up times that you know, are outstanding. I mean, we have in the virtual paddle league, we don't have yet any times from people like Connor or Michael Booth or Casper, but we've got you know, an Olympian from Russia who's 27 years old and in his prime, and is actually coaching in China. So he's very high level, and he's very enthusiastic and loves paddling. And so we have him going fast. We've got some older guys like myself and Tommy Budai and Peter that are former canoe paddlers and doing okay. We've got young guys like yourself and Bodie. You know, so there's a good mix of, I think, people competing. But I think every single paddler that you talk to, whether they're my age or whether they're your age, has a paddler that they're a fan of in particular. You know, somebody that whose career they follow, somebody who they admire for the way that they paddle, the way that they train, or the things that they've accomplished, or perhaps you know, the things that they've done to help grow the sport. And if you look at stand-up paddling, even though it's a young sport, there's still some really colorful people, you know, that have are at the top of our sport and who have done incredible things. So people like Connor and Kai Lenny, and you know, they jump to mind. People like Bart Desvort, who you know, is the premier ultra long distance paddler in the world. He comes to mind. You know, there's just, you know, there's so many people who have done special things, and I'm just wondering, do you have a particular athlete in the sport that you look to as your favorite, or a role model that you try to learn the most from, or that you try to emulate, or you know, would that, you know, that sort of is your I guess your biggest role model? Do you have one, or is?
Well, if I have to name a few, there are just so many athletes that have a little thing of their own. Tito Mompio is one of the paddlers that most refined technique, what I find, because posture is relatively the same. Like I stood next to him and we were same height, almost same height, and I think his paddle style mostly matches mine. I think what he has can be my own. And you have Michael Booth. He gives athletes a hard time on the water. He has a winning mindset, and every paddler has his own thing that you can take, and it will become yours. And of course, you have Connor. He's been in the sport for so long, and every year he's still winning very important races, like the sprint in the ICF in China. The 200-meter sprint on one side. He paddled the entire sprint only on one side. It'll be it's still interesting to see what he will do in the future, because nowadays he's become a dad. Maybe he will have more power, more will, right?
Yeah, oh, for sure. I mean, it's complicating life, right? But maybe it's inspiration to go further, you know, like you never know. There was a guy, I live in Toronto, and the basketball team in Toronto, the Raptors, are very popular, and last year they won the NBA title. And there was a guy in the team who was struggling in the playoffs, and his name is Fred VanVleet, and he was struggling, and all of a sudden, you know, his wife was pregnant, and she had the baby, and then every game after that, he was insane how good he was, and it was like everyone was saying, "Oh, he's a dad, and it's because he's a new dad. His game is, you know, exploded," and I'm sure it was because he's a highly skilled athlete, but it seemed to be this inspiration that just, or, you know, it took pressure off him. Maybe it helped him realize you know, what the priorities in life are. You know, sport is important, but it's not as important as other things, as family and that type of thing. And so you know, you never know how somebody will respond to that's such a dramatic change in their lives, right? And you know, it could be very difficult because it could change the situation and make it harder to find the time to train, or it could be the type of thing that made whatever pressure that somebody felt in their sport go away totally, and now they can be free of pressure when they compete. You know, it could have any effect on them.
Yeah, I also admire someone who's well in his 50s from Canada, who's still smoking 20, 30-year-olds.
Yeah, he tries. Thank you. You know what's fun is, as I mentioned, I love paddling, and it sounds like for a lot of the same reasons that you do. And I never really stopped training when I finished racing in canoe, because I enjoyed being on the water, and I also enjoyed being healthy and fit. And So I trained at a much lower level, but I continued to train. And what I found is that provided that you do it regularly, that you don't let yourself, deteriorate too much, you can maintain a high level of fitness for a long time in life. If you're lucky, if you avoid illness and injury, then you can be, if you like it, as long as you still enjoy it, you can still be good. And obviously it's more difficult, and you can't be as good as you once were, but you can still be decent. And so this is a fun thing for me. It's like it's a privilege for me to be able to compete with guys that are younger. And I almost feel like in our virtual paddle league, we have almost 3 generations of athletes. We have the grandfather generation, which is like my generation. And then we have the father generation, which is like guys who are in their prime, like Andre. And then we have the kid generation, which is like yourself and Bodie. And all of us are, relatively close and competing with each other. And it's a special thing. And I don't know what other sports where this happens, this to me has been one of the most fun things about the virtual paddle league, is the variety of people that we have in it, and the fact that I think there's 10 times in the 5K that are under 30 minutes, which is, in my thinking, if you're going under 30 minutes for 5K, you're doing pretty good, right? Because it's under 6 minute per kilometer pace. So it's been a neat experience to have that. Just a few more questions, Donnie. There are scheduled some Euro Tour races this year.
Yes.
Are you planning on doing any of them?
Well, I was planning on doing Denmark, but Denmark wasn't going to happen.
Okay.
And the first Euro Tour, is Belgium. So in the Moor. So I think I am going to that race as the first Euro Tour race, especially because it's only 3, maybe 4 hour drive to Belgium. It's well, it's a drivable distance to Belgium.
Right. And what's the date of that? The Denmark race was early in August, if I remember correctly. It was, I want to say August 4th, I think.
Yeah.
And the just so we can, no one in North America misses following you in the Belgium race. If you go, what do you remember what the date of that is?
No, not really.
Okay, we'll look it up. We'll make sure that we post it on the Paddle Monster or in the Virtual Paddle League so people can follow along in that. And then, so I guess the last question, we kind of touched upon it, but we didn't. I was going to ask you about your goals for the future, but we did kind of touch upon that. Do you look forward to, at some point in the future, coming to North America and racing in North America?
Well, the Oregon Downwinder is always on my bucket list.
Yeah.
And maybe when the days are back to Battle of the Paddle at Salt Lake Creek, and those I've seen it was absolute carnage.
It was total carnage.
The days where 100 boards were on the water.
Yeah.
With thousands of people watching.
Yeah. Yeah. There's. What's your favorite type of racing? Because I mean, in these virtual races, you're doing it in flat water, but you mentioned that you've done some pretty big downwinders. Then there's technical racing. What is your favorite type of racing at this point?
Because the Netherlands is mostly a flat water grind in for the Dutch Championships, and there's a 20K race in the capital of North Holland. I think flat water racing and the technical aspect, but I still need to improve on my ocean skills.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing for sure.
How often do you paddle in the ocean?
Not very often. That's the thing, because it's a 1 hour drive.
Okay.
But tidal lake for me is 30 minutes.
Okay.
30 minutes.
And then, so now, are you? You mentioned school, and you finished school for the summer. What grade would you be in your school? Like, you're 15 now, so I'm just thinking in Canada that puts a 15-year-old is at like grade 10 level. I don't know how they organize the school years in Holland, but how many more years would you have until you graduate and have a chance to maybe go to a university?
Well, counting next year, 4, 5, 6, 3 more years. 3 more years, and then I finish school, and then I can graduate to a university.
And is that something that you think you'd like to do? Is to go to university?
Yes.
Yeah.
I would like to go to university because still it's always in the bag to have a diploma,
right?
To have a job, like
right.
an actual job, and have some income. I think it's always nice to have to paddle, and it's all fun and games, but you have to be the top 3 of the world to make a job out of it.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think you can do both. There's no stopping you back to doing both. It's not, I wouldn't say a fallback plan, but it's another goal in life.
Yeah, I agreed. I think that it's important to do both. I mean, one of the things that in Canada, if you're an Olympic athlete, they will, the government will pay for your school if you want to go to university while you're training and competing. So when you do finish your sport career, that you can have the education to get a good job. And that was very important for me and very helpful for me. But I guess the thing is, if you want to go to university and you want to be a paddler and do both at the same time, who knows, maybe you can end up going like to the University of Hawaii or something, and you can get to do both, at the same time, really get to paddle in the ocean every day as well. Who knows? Donnie, I'm going to let you go. I don't know. It looks like we've been on almost an hour. So this is going to be great. I think that what we're going to do is we're going to post this on the Virtual Paddle League Clubhouse, where people can link to it. And so everyone that you're racing against has an opportunity to meet you and find out a little bit more about you. We're going to post it on Paddle Monster. We're going to put it on our YouTube channel. So we're going to put it out there so as many people as possible can meet you. I'm certain that if people aren't familiar with you yet from what you're doing in these virtual races and any other races that you're going in, that they will in the next year or two. And I do think that people in North America would be really interested in meeting you. It's interesting, when I started paddling, it was largely a sport based in the United States and in Australia. And but since that time, it seems it's gotten really popular in Europe, and then South America and other countries all over the world. And so it's a much more global sport than it was. and to the point where, you know, even though most of our business is in the United States, I don't think about it being really an American sport anymore. It's a global sport, and I know there's some, you know, great competitors and champions from Europe, but you know, I think people like yourself are the next wave of top paddlers, and you're from Holland, from the Netherlands, so I think that's really cool. I'd like to extend an invitation to you that if you ever are in North America, you should come to Toronto, and you can paddle with my group. We're mostly older guys, but we paddle on Lake Ontario, which is a rather large lake. It looks like an inland ocean. And we have a guy that distributes the light cork boards in Canada at my canoe club, so he can get you set up. You won't even have to ride a starboard or something. You can ride your own board, and you've always got a place to stay. And we'd love to have you come sometime. So hopefully that's something in the future. Hopefully you stick with the sport and continue to develop at the rate you've been developing. And I know that, as I said, everyone's going to enjoy this interview and is going to be excited to follow you now and see where you take this. So I want to wish you good luck and you know, continued success and all the best into the future. And I'd like to give a shout out to your dad as well, because I've interacted a little bit with him on Facebook, and he seems like he's really got his priorities in order for you. And now, having heard that, you know, he's kind of the guy that got you started and has spent so much time with you. And I love his comment about, you know, you only get to drink the champagne if you do the work. I think he'd be an interesting interview too. So please say hi to him for me. And thank you for spending the last hour with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Larry Cain. It's a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for such media coverage. I very appreciate it.
Okay, Donnie, all the best. And I will see you on the virtual race course.
Maybe in Canada.
That would be good. That would be great. But in the meantime, in the virtual race course, that will be great. And we'll follow you for the rest of the season for sure.
Great initiatives for the virtual race course.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Okay. Thank you, Donnie.
Thank you.